You've eaten Gotham's wealth, its spirit, but your feast is nearly over.
This is not my home. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon. Why aren't you laughing?
From this moment on, none of you are safe.
Welcome to the Batman Book Club, a podcast exploring the Dark Knight Library. I am your host, Ryan Lauer. The Batman Book Club is a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network, hosted by Batman on Film. Just go to batmanonfilm.com, click on podcasts, and you'll find the Batman Podcast Network. That is a whole list of other Bat-related shows that also like to dive into other nerdy subjects that all of us, including the one Sir Peter Vera, love to frolic about. He's the biggest frolicker. All of us frolic in our free time. Pete frolics, dives headfirst into the fields to frolic. Don't let him tell you otherwise. Batman Book Club is also on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/thebatmanbc if you like what's going on with the show and you want to help support it. A big shout out to Alex Light, who just became a patron. So Alex, thank you very much for supporting the show. Yeah, if you want to join Alex and just support the show, just go to patreon.com/thebatmanbc. And again, thank you, Alex. Now, thank you for listening to episode 149, The Chalice. Joining me for this episode, he's returning to the show. He's been on here a number of times. He doesn't get sick of me, I guess. Also, I think he wants a platform to fire back at Peter Vera, who loves to come at this guy for being a Wally West super fan. It's one Sir Javi Trujillo. Javi, welcome back to the Batman Book Club.
Hey, Ryan, thank you. Thank you for having me back. I'm in the Five Timers Club now, I think.
You are. You're wearing your special jacket, just like all the SNL members.
That's
or
right.
Maybe you're not. Maybe it's on the way in the mail. I don't know. Let's leave it a little mystery.
I've got my honorary cigar. I'm ready to go.
Yep. Big old stogie. Now, before we dive into Batman, why don't you go after Pete right now? You have a platform now. Go after that frolicker. He's been talking trash. Get him.
And normally I would do that. You know, you can go on the dark web and find video of Peter Vera frolicking through the fields of New Jersey, boudin spilling out of his pockets. Olive Garden in his hands. Despite my happiness at finally joining the Five Timers Club, like my frolic level is a little lower today because on Twitter, the Batman Book Club March Madness bracket has Neil Adams beating my favorite Jim Aparo, and I'm a little sad about that today.
That's okay.
We don't know the final results. We don't know who, guessed the bracket correctly, but on the Twitter poll that you posted, I mean, Neil Adams is handily besting Jim Aparo, and I get it. I love Neil Adams. There's a Green Arrow autographed print by Neil right to my right.
R.I.P.
I love that guy, but man, Jim Adams, Death in the Family, Nightfall.
I think so.
Batman 432.
You just had a Freudian slip. You just said Jim Adams. Look at that, Javi. So as much as you don't want to believe it, I think Neil's on your heart, sharing some space with Jim Aparo.
He is. But still, I like to root for Jim.
Yeah, so the results of the brackets, by the time that this episode drops, I mean, it's known. The winner has already been notified.
Obviously, it wasn't me.
Yeah, it wasn't Javi. There's many people who were doing pretty well. And then there was a round that shocked, I think, everybody. And it was pretty surprising. And actually, prep yourself because next episode is episode 150, and it's going to be
the one where you have Tim
difference.
King and Sean Gordon Murphy and Tim Sheridan all together.
Tom King, not Tim King.
Did I do it again? Oh my god!
You're combining all of your
my Batman,
all of your Batman
coffee
talents.
here.
Yeah, but no, me and guests are going to be talking about some Batman artistry. So if you're listening to this, most likely you're subscribed to the show, and so when that episode drops, it'll come in your feed. But yeah, stay tuned. Fun discussion coming, and the brackets will be mentioned there as well. So
Nice.
there'll be a lot of mentioning of Tim King, Jim Adams, all the greats. Norm Bermejo, bunch of
Norm
good ones.
Bermejo is
Yeah,
one of the top Batman artists of all time.
Jim Mazzucchelli. Yeah, all the greats. But
He's not as good as Frank Lee, but
no,
you
frankly,
know,
what a guy. What a guy. Everything, all of his were frameable. But yeah, we'll talk more about the brackets in the next episode and stuff. But yeah, they have concluded. Neil Adams has been voted on. I didn't choose him as the winner. Everyone who voted chose Neil Adams as the winner. So I couldn't argue with that end result if it would have swung the other way with Aparo either. It's like, I don't know. With someone like Batman, there's so many good artists that there's you kind of couldn't, most likely wouldn't have argued with the result. But let's move on. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of this episode. And let's get to talking about Batman the Chalice. Now a more, what do you want to say, fancy way of saying that, Javi, if I want to dip into some French, this is Le Chalice.
the Chalice.
So let's talk Le Chalice. Story was written in 1999, released in 1999, written by Chuck Dixon with art. Gee, you heard that name before, Chuck Dixon? With art from John Van Fleet. And it's available in a trade paperback. It's available in hardcover and a deluxe edition hardcover that I think was released in 2021. It's available digitally. It's available also on DC Universe Infinite Ultra. And also it's available on my favorite app of all time, Hoopla. So Javi, for this episode, which version did you read?
All I read my original
okay.
my original hardcover from 1999.
Excellent.
And then yesterday I was at work, so I read it again on DC Universe Infinite.
You read it at work?
I read it at work.
For shame.
Well, no, because my work computer that I read it on, like the screen is bigger than any screen I have in this house, and it's bigger than the art. So it actually made it look even better because it was bigger.
There you go.
I got to appreciate the nuance of Mr. Van Fleet.
There you go. I went to my favorite app of all time, Hoopla. Read it digitally on the iPad. And yeah, this is one that I do not own. More on that coming up.
Taking your card.
That's right. When was the first time that you read this story?
99 when it came out. There was a little era there where DC was just cranking out like these little random hardcovers.
Mm-hmm.
This was one of them. Like, it wasn't just like a prestige format thing. Like, it's a legit hardcover. They did this. There was a Green Lantern one. I think it was like No Fear or Fear Itself. The life story of the Flash, JLA Earth 2. Like, there was a time I was just grabbing these things because it was cool. Like, for $20, you get this nifty little hardcover adventure.
Which, they, not as thick, but kind of the One Bad Day initiative that they've done, a similar sort of deal. That's kind of fun when it does drop, a book like that's, an extended issue, but it's a self-contained one story. I like those because it's just easier to just pick up and read rather than doing like a 6-issue arc spread out over 6 months or something like that. I do like just grabbing the story in its full.
And there's so many things on my bat shelf that are hardcovers, but they're collecting things, either like miniseries like Batman Damned or like any of the regular Batman runs. Like, I've got some of the Tom Keene stuff. Obviously, I've got the Morrison stuff in various hardcover editions, but those are all collections. Like, what I appreciate about this story is its original to itself. Like this isn't like 3 issues that were then collected later after the fact. Like this was it. And there's not a
Gotcha.
lot of
Yeah,
Batman books that can say that.
I agree. Um, when I first read this, I probably first read this had to be like maybe 2018,
Okay.
2019. I read it through Hoopla.
When did the show start? The Batman Book Club.
The week that Tom Hanks got COVID.
Okay.
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah.
That was when the first episode dropped, and Ryan Haas and I were recording like an hour after it was announced that Tom Hanks got COVID. So that's how Haas and I have been able to like keep track of everything because we're in the middle. And like, should we keep going or do we need to? What do
Yeah.
we do? Sure, let's talk Batman. But yeah, 2020. So, I'm pretty. I don't want to say I'm pretty new to this story, but it's not fresh in my mind. So,
Mhm.
we'll get to that a little, and even more another
Just
tease, and just a little wait a
yeah.
little bit longer. Gotta ask you one more question though.
Yeah.
Why Le Chalice? Because this is one that you and I had mentioned quite a while ago, and it
Yeah.
was a when we get to the scheduling, like yeah, you and we'll get to this book, much like Robert Reineke and I. We were gonna do the Doom that came to Gotham. We knew it was coming. It was just, but we've just got to wait. Um, so I knew I was talking the Chalice with you. So why is
It
this one that was on your list?
it's something that just personally I wanted to revisit because I remember really loving it when it came out, but I
Mhm.
haven't dusted it off in like at least a decade or if not longer. So I thought it'd be good for me personally to look at it again. And also like the stuff that you and I have talked about, a lot of it has been bigger, blockbuster type things, like more well-known stories, at least to me. Like we've done Year Three and Batman R.I.P. and
Right.
most recently, and something like A Death in the Family, where that actually pushed itself ahead of this on like my list of stuff I wanted to talk about because it was more prescient at the time. So this has been on the back burner for a while, but it's just of all the stuff that you have covered and you've run the gamut, like this is just one of those weird little gems that I wanted to bring to people's attentions because it is so different. It's not, it's not one of the bigger known
Hmm.
titles. And I think that's part of the fun of the show is hearing about more like obscure Batman stuff as well as like the well-known stuff. Like
Yeah.
everybody knows the Court of Owls and loves the Court of Owls, and it's cool to hear people's
Stories you just mentioned that you and I have talked
yeah,
about. People know those.
yeah, but like to get these little gems, like when the Carusos did like that one-off story
Never heard
from
of
like
them.
from like Cataclysm or No Man's somewhere in that era. Like
No
it's
Man's
it's
Land. Yeah.
cool. It's cool to get those little things too, because I mean the show can run for decades on the amount
Amok.
of Batman stories that we have. And I wanted to grab just a little off the beaten trail story before I eventually torture you if you'll have me back to do more Morrisonian elements.
I'm not
Because
as
that
against as people would think or that you'd think. I'd probably actually surprise you, but that's a discussion for another day.
that's another day.
So the Chalice, I agree with you on one, especially for it coming out in 1999. The writer attached to this book, Chuck Dixon.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with Chuck Dixon because he was so prevalent in Batman comics when I first got started in Batman comics. That's why Brayfogle, Aparo, Alan Grant, those names are so like there in my mind because those are the first comics that I was reading. Those are the first names that I was seeing when I was reading Batman and stuff. And Chuck Dixon was another one that was popping up a lot. So I know the name of Chuck Dixon.
He is a pillar of 90s Batman, like
Hmm.
without a doubt. Just the volume of work he created for the Bat universe, because it's not just Batman, it's Nightwing, it's Robin. Like,
Yeah.
dude was everywhere.
Yeah. So this story is actually at first, I think I put it off a lot because I wasn't sure about the art.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also part of like getting like I'd seen the Chalice like the cover and interiors and stuff like that before on the internet, but as far as like my hands on a copy, also, it's not like I saw it like at the library to read, and I just didn't see it around much. And so Hoopla saves the day always is where I first got to look at it, and I'll admit that I was not excited to revisit this one.
Yeah.
But it was very, very fuzzy on what happened in it. Even though, I read it in, 2018 or 2019 or something, it was very fuzzy of, I don't really remember what this was about. Now, the version that I read, though, included the Ankh, ANKH, parts 1 and 2, or books 1 and 2 as well. And in rereading the Chalice for this episode, it then hit me of like, oh, I think I grouped the Ankh in with the Chalice, and I don't think I liked the Ankh like really at all. I didn't read that and finish reading that before this episode either, because I just wanted to reread the Chalice, and I did that like twice. But I'm like, I think that was that kind of stained the whole book for some reason. I didn't enjoy the Ankh, and we'll see because I'm going to finish reading that again, and we'll see if that still holds true, because I don't love the Chalice. I do think it's like fine, but it's waves of I really like this, and then this is just kind of slow. And I think for me, that's kind of how the book was throughout. So you find this to be like a gem. We can just start dipping into whatever sections you want to, if you want to do a quick overview on why you think it's a gem, or we get into specifics. So you can lead the way on what you want to touch on first, since you like this story.
We'll deal with the Ankh, because the Ankh was not like the Chalice where it was a hardcover. It was 2 prestige issues that came out after this, and like the covers are very striking. But like similar to you, like I don't remember anything. Like I don't even remember what the plot is for that story at all. And it's something I've wanted to revisit also, just on my own, because I don't remember if I liked it or if I disliked it, or if I just bought it because it was Van Fleet.
Same creative team.
Yeah.
So that's why the deluxe, and because I swear I read that one with the Chalice. So this deluxe edition that came out just 2 years ago
listed as part 2, which is, I don't think they're connected. Other than the team, I don't think the stories have anything to do with each other.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. Like I said, it's been a while.
I just know it, like I've read them both. I just know I've read them both. And there was stink on Ankh that
watched over
Chalice. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this, I guess we can just start with like this. The setup of the story is basically the Holy Grail, the Chalice itself, which is not referred to as the Chalice at all in the book.
Yeah, it goes by a couple of names,
Grail,
but not
the Grail, the Holy Grail, and the Cup. But it was the one that, and this is dipping into the religious settings of the story, it was the one that Jesus ate lamb out of during the Last Supper. It was also the cup that caught some of the blood of Christ while he was on the cross. So it's very like heavily sought after religious artifact that ends up in the hands of Bruce Wayne, and somebody is coming to get it.
Lots of somebodies are coming to get it.
And as Bruce says at one point to Alfred, I think we can guess a familiar name that wants this the most. We'll get to that one. Go ahead. What you were going to say.
Like for me, little known fact, I grew up as a huge Indiana Jones fan in like the 80s and 90s.
Would have never
That's
guessed.
Like primarily where I grew up. Yeah. I'm wearing an Indiana Jones hat right now as we record this, just to get in the spirit. So, but it's not like a part of my fandom that is as well known as other aspects, because for a long time there's no content coming out to get excited about or discuss. Like it's all been discussed and had. So Even back then when this came out, this is 10 years after the last Indiana Jones movie, which was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which is Indiana Jones looking for the chalice, right? And I grew up Catholic and Catholic school my whole elementary and high school. So like this was like in my groove back then. So it was cool to see like these two kind of worlds merge in a sense. And when it comes to like my Batman fandom, like I'm not strictly like a one type of Batman guy. I know there are certain people that like solo Batman, or they like the Bat family, or like they like the grounded gritty detective, or they like the big JLA stuff.
Yeah.
I'm all over the place with Batman. Like I can appreciate both sides of the coin. I don't really have necessarily a preference, because there's so much out there that it ultimately doesn't matter, because you'll find the Batman that you love, right? So I think for me it's fun to have these more globe-trotting, expansive Batman adventures, just to throw in the mix every now and then. I wouldn't want Batman to be like this all the time, but I think for like this instance it works really well. And to your point, like of what Dixon's doing here, it's like it's so rooted in the era of Batman that he was writing, that I think he takes a break after this, or he's near the end of his Batman tenure. So there's a lot of elements that if you were reading 90s Batman at the time, you get in this book. Just the rogues gallery, like in this, is huge. We get Two-Face, we get Catwoman, we see a little bit of Penguin, Talia, and of course Ra's al Ghul.
There you go.
Or Roz, if that's your preference. But I mean, it's a pretty big adventure, and it feels for me like it's like 100 pages on its own, just the Chalice part of it. But it doesn't feel like 100 pages to me. For me, it moves really quickly, and there's a lot of splash pages. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but it doesn't feel like it takes, for me, it didn't feel like it took as long to read as it should when you think, oh my God, I'm going to read 100 pages of something. I think it moved fairly quickly for me. Did you find that at all? Or it sounded like you said it lagged a little bit at times for you.
Back and forth, because I do think that there's moments of like good pacing. So when there's interior dialogue, or the boxes of setting up, the scene and stuff like that, if there's a lot of words, like I'm not saying that slows down the pace. I know that is more content for you to read and digest, as opposed to sometimes, like I've always commented that Sean Murphy's White Knight universe, I think that every issue just bam, it just goes, because there isn't much like internal dialogue and stuff like that. It is just dialogue, one character to another, and action moments and stuff like that, and it just goes. This has almost more style like that, but I guess it just feels like, and it's weird because I read a summary of it. I think it's a DC.fandom, which does summaries of issues and stories and everything. And I was reading their breakdown of the story with this, and I'm like, see, summarizing in this way, everything does like make sense, and it moves, and it does feel like, man, a lot happens in these. I think on digitally it says like 96 pages even, or something like that. But just in reading it, it's like, okay, let's go a little bit. But I think, and it's always the good part of like discussion, where it's like I should be enjoying this more than I do. I don't think it's always good. It's not good criticism to sit there and just say that, like, yeah, it's not good. Yeah, it sucks.
Right.
The story's not good, because it is like I'm reading it and I'm like, one, who am I to tell Chuck Dixon at this time of that something he wrote isn't good? Like, yeah, get out of here, kid. But like, two, also like in thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, we got here because of this and this. Yeah, this happened because this and this. And it's like there aren't pieces of the story missing.
Yeah.
But there's something with it, I think, that is is just making me wanting to shoot a little adrenaline in the story somehow. And you don't feel that way.
No, like for me, it feels like a widescreen adventure, and I think it feels out of the norm because of the art, which definitely makes it feel separate from like the stuff Dixon was doing in the monthly books.
Yeah.
Like there's a different
This could also
texture
be
to
like
the
Black
visuals.
Label back in '99 with like how
Yeah.
the art is different from these
Yeah.
monthly titles and stuff. Yeah. It's different.
Yeah.
And that too for me, like there were panels that I thought was great, and there were panels where I'm like, this feels a little messy.
Yeah, there's a lot of like blackness. There's a lot of inkiness that the art takes on at times that you can't, that maybe it's a little harder to read or make out what's going on.
Yeah.
Like your eye does something different. And it's painted, but I don't know if it's really painted or just like digitally painted. I don't know if that was quite a thing back then in '99, but there's definitely, I made a note, there's definitely a lot of like speckles, like paint speckles to like everything there, which adds to like that whole like Middle Ages vibe that they're trying to capture.
Good call.
And the story opens during one of the Crusades, and there's a knight going to get the chalice from someone, and
this doesn't bother me. Go ahead, sorry.
He's got like this emblem on his chest that looks kind of like a bat.
Yes.
But it also kind of looks like Raish's Demon's Head logo. But what I appreciated about this knight is he's incorruptible, you know. And as I say that, I can look at this Heath Ledger poster behind you, and all I'm thinking is his line from The Dark Knight, you know, about Batman being, you know, truly incorruptible. And that's kind of what this knight is. Like, he doesn't give in to the temptations that the chalice offers or that what he could do with it. He goes to protect it, which,
so it's funny to me you brought that up, because I mean, we do find out later in the story from Lord Winsley and Earl of Grambling, Peter de Wettering. Okay, but I do love how Dixon even says it, where the character himself is just kind of like, the devil in those titles. My name's Peter.
yeah,
my name's Peter de Wettering, because Booth even says, do I call you Lord? Do I call you Earl? What do I call you? But that guy, you know, and we come to find out that Bruce's family are descendants of the knight Gawain.
Yes.
Who we see at the beginning of this story. Like, right? Like, that's how I took it.
Yeah.
This is the knight at the beginning. We don't know that that's who he is at first, but in his relation to the story, but that emblem on it, and I'm kind of like, classic comic books, like centuries ago, there's a Wayne, and that was a bat kind of, you know, it's bat related, where it's not. And I'm like, some of those moments, I just kind of roll my eyes, because I'm like, no, the link of Batman and a Wayne happened in Bruce's study when the bat crashed through the window. It's not this blood thing that happened, you know, started in 1597, and, you know, something. And people like to do that, where it's just almost like it's been this link all this time. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. This didn't. It's just kind of, to me, like a fun little nod, if you want to take it that way.
Right.
And so then it's like, it doesn't bother me.
And like, it's not maybe as overt as we're making it sound. Like, I think there is some room for interpretation on what that symbol is.
Yeah.
It's not like cut and dried. Oh, this is a bat. Like, it doesn't look like any bat logo we've seen.
It could be a W.
Batman wear.
Like, it could be a W, because we know how, and so Gawain, like, we know that in other cultures, it's like W's can be said like V's.
Yeah.
Also, so maybe it was, you know, Wayne, but it's just like pronounced as Gawain. You know, I don't know. I'm just throwing mud at the wall.
Did you read it came out the year before the Chalice, so it may have slipped your attention. Batman,
I was a youngster
Scottish...
with no money.
Yeah. There was a Prestige one-shot, Batman the Scottish Connection, by Morrison and Frank Quitely. It was the first time I saw Quitely's artwork, and it took me by
delivered
surprise. It wasn't my cup of tea back in '98. I'll say it like that. I
I'm looking it up. I don't
I
think
don't
I've
have I don't have it anymore, and I hate myself for getting rid of it.
Alan Grant.
Was it Alan Grant? I thought it was Morrison.
I think name just popped up and said Alan Grant. Um,
Maybe I'm making
Alan
stuff
Grant
up
and
in my.
Frank
I've been
Quitely.
getting names wrong all day.
The
You're
late
right. It
great
is
Alan
Alan
Grant.
Grant. It's
R.I.P.
because of Quitely that I thought Morrison, and Scottish I thought Morrison.
Sure.
But yeah, it's Alan Grant.
No, I haven't read that
Um,
one.
yeah, that goes into Batman's history of being Scottish, and there's a family connection where his ancestor Gawain Dewayne something, and it's all crazily spelled. But
Gawain
I'd
Dewey.
read, yeah, I'd read that the year before this, and when it came out. So hearing
Excellent.
like he's got this knight that he's maybe related to the Gawain, like that kind of sounded like the Scottish connection. So it felt like it was like it all kind of came to it's all connected,
It's all
right?
connected. It's all
It's
always
all
is.
connected.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just helped me like set the mood for like the story. Like it didn't seem too out of the ordinary because I'd already heard about Batman's Scottish connections the year before, like his family history.
Yeah.
And Alfred in this is really really droll. He's prime Alfred. And
Mhm.
but he kind of like subliminally lays this groundwork. He asks Bruce another battle in the endless crusade and another long evening of gallivanting, sir. Like there's all these little night illusions that get thrown
Yeah.
in there that kind of set Batman up as the current day Knight of the Chalice.
I felt like actually that this Bruce slash Batman was a little bit more cynical and out of character than the usual one. Um, because even almost like a more cynical version of Batman is just like this is my job. This is what I do each night. Got Two-Face
Yeah,
again. Threw him in Arkham. Here, like two lines that I even wrote down of what he said. Is like I think the one is like internal. Even he's just like he just seems very much like this endless crusade, and it's almost like this doesn't even matter because Two-Face is just gonna go back in. Nothing changes. And like another thing, it's of like it's just not enough. And I'm like, I know these are just like a couple lines, but that mood, and there's a but coming. That mood there at the beginning and setting up like this Batman just seems a little bit more, like this is like more cynical than even like the having having a tough day sort of Batman that we've read in comics over and over.
mm-hmm.
But upon the second read of this, as in like, I read it once all the way through and then reread it again just before we started talking. I felt like maybe that's a little bit I mean, it's all open for interpretation of maybe that's a little bit of the point of restoring his faith because of this story, the inclusion and the topic of religion in this as well. And maybe I'm digging too deep into it, but like maybe it is like it's a man now that you see that he's just going more negative, more negative. He needs a little bit of hope, a little bit of faith. Oh, look at that. Here's the inclusion of religion now all of a sudden into this story. And maybe that's a connection and a small little thread.
Yeah, I think both interpretations that you just had are pretty valid. Like I didn't necessarily see that cynicism.
Sure.
But I understand like when you mention it, like, no, that makes total sense given what he's
Yeah.
gone through. And it seems to be more of like an entry level Batman, if you will. Like if you're not necessarily familiar with the character, like you're not reading it month in and month out, like if you're just diving in, like this would be for like that crowd to
Mm-hmm.
be like, oh, this is Batman. It's like Superman with a never ending battle. It's the same thing for Batman in this story.
Yeah.
What I found odd, especially in terms of like the Bruce Alfred dynamic, was Alfred doesn't really know a whole lot about the Grail, but like Batman's like, I'm a Grail scholar. Like I've done all this,
Yeah.
been interested in this the whole
I've done
time. I'm
some
like,
research, Alfred.
and while I'm used to like a Batman who knows a lot about a lot of things, like it felt weird to me that he would know more than like Alfred on this subject. Just because like Alfred with his English upbringing, you'd think he'd know more about like knights
True.
and the Crusades
Yeah.
than rich boy Bruce Wayne, even though he has traveled the world. So I thought that was interesting. But looking at like Batman's history right now, like this is 99, so we're not quite, or no, we're in the middle of like no man's land at this point when this was released. Like maybe at the cusp of it ending. So like I could see some of that cynicism creeping in there just a little bit.
Hmm.
Like he's been through Nightfall, he's been through Contagion. Yeah, No Man's Land ended like at December of 99. So this is like right at the end of that. And
Yeah.
as far as we can tell, like this Gotham is a restored Gotham. Like
Yeah.
there's not a time specifically set on it. They don't mention any other events. But
This
like we've
feels
got,
like status quo Batman.
yeah, like
As far
Penguin's
as
in
like
the
the
Iceberg
setting.
Lounge.
Yeah.
Selina's in her purple suit. Ubu is, I don't know what's going on with Ubu with
Yeah.
his Jason mask,
Yeah.
but
He's playing dress up. He's cosplaying.
yeah, that was weird. But that's the era that this is coming out in is like right at the end of No Man's Land in the comics.
I mean, you can even throw that in there too, the inclusion, which I felt was maybe out of nowhere, but also like whatever is, the 2 pages that Azrael shows up.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
I mean,
Azrael's in there too.
that's a little bit to me. It's just, I think it's fine that it's in there, but also if I'd skip those pages, it wouldn't matter. However, he does almost plant a little bit of like a seed in Bruce's mind, because Bruce even references that when he goes and sees Gordon. And he said what John Paul said. I've been thinking about what John Paul said.
Yeah. There's
Um,
like Azrael, Gordon, they're a little more than cameos to this story, but like I like having them in there. I liked having Azrael in there, even though you would think he would factor into it more. But
yeah.
given that he's got like this whole religious
Tie.
background and
Yeah.
upbringing to him, like it, I think it would be weird to not have him given this era. Like from a 2023 perspective, like yeah, I think it stands out more because he's not in the mix regularly. But if you got this back in 1999, like it makes total sense that Azrael would be in there.
I mean, this isn't that far removed from when this character took over for Batman and
Yeah,
involved in the massive mega event known as Nightfall. So that's what I mean. Like, it doesn't surprise me that he does show up. I think he could be removed and it wouldn't hurt the story in any way whatsoever. That you mentioned with Gordon too. Of course, I love it whenever Gordon pops up. Like, he's one of the mainstays in Batman lore. One of the first allies mentioned, if not the
Mhm.
first. I think Alfred's probably always mentioned as the first ally of Batman, but right behind him, Gordon probably. If not, it's
Yeah.
like Alfred, Robin, Batgirl, then
I
Gordon.
mean,
He's one of the
Gordon,
top. He's one of
yeah,
the tops always. So it's always good to see him, but I kind of feel like the GCPD aspect of this is almost just kind
tangential.
of there too. So like we're inside GCPD and Harvey gets Bullock gets, a folder about these murders that have happened, some beheadings. And Montoya says, well, the results say that this one body, he's over 200 years old. And she's like, so we were handed it because of, it's a freak murder. And
Yeah.
then we don't visit with them for quite a while. And then they
Until the
show up
end
like
with
again at the
the
end.
aftermath. Yeah.
Yeah, at the aftermath. So it's almost like, it's fun that we see him, but also is it really needed? And that's not me trying to approach this with a cynical view, because there's many things that I see and something pops up that probably could be removed. And I'm like, well, I was happy that was included just for sheer fanboyness.
Yeah.
So it doesn't hurt the story, but it was more noticeable in the second time around, knowing, being fresh on the story and reading it and being like, they don't have much here, except I would say by because good old Lord Winsley and Earl of Grumbling, Peter, he dies. And then
Yeah.
Montoya says, like his he's over 200 years old. So that then starts to us as the reader accept what Bruce probably is very defiant in accepting that, hold on, there's bigger matters at play here. This cup looks just like a cup, which he and Alfred are both not impressed in what it looks like because they figure it's going to be more impressive. There's more to this. Like, open up your mind and accept possibilities a little bit more. So in that case, you could say that's the importance of their inclusion. It's like, okay, I think there's another way that you can do this. Like, Bruce is shot in the leg, and then he pours water out of the cup onto it, and it heals.
Straight out of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Like that was the first thing I went to, was when Sean Connery gets shot and Indiana Jones pours the Gradle, or the chalice water, whatever you want to call it, on his wound, and it immediately heals up.
Healed.
And that's, where Batman, because they, like you said, they do the analysis, and there is nothing spectacular about it whatsoever. But then when they actually put it into practice, like, something special happens.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things. Like, Barbara briefly makes a cameo too, and her contribution is, there's some weird binary code in here that says stuff,
references
about
a line from the scripture from the Bible.
Yeah, but it's just one of those, like, cameos that entrenches you in this world, because she's Oracle at this point. She's paralyzed from the Killing Joke, and Bruce wants to offer her healing, and that's not for her. Like, she's not ready for that.
I respect that choice from Dixon as well for the character of Barbara, who says that, like, if she basically, if I am to heal and get out of this chair, I don't want it to be because of a miracle.
Yeah.
Like, that kind of, I think that's pretty spot on for that character. And I think that's a good little moment. And that too is almost like, as you just said, that strengthens the use of her in the story, even though it's very brief, and it adds a little bit more appreciation of the character because of that moment too. So she has figured out this code that references a line of scripture in the Bible. Plus, she has her self character moment of, like, no, when I get out of the chair, I want it to be because of me. I don't want it to be because of a miracle. Two, like, I don't know, good things in the story by using her.
Yeah, I think if you were to, like, try and adapt this to a different medium, like the stuff with the way Gordon's used, the way Montoya and Bullock are used, Azrael, Barbara, those would probably get pushed aside. But if you're reading this, like, if you're doing a Batman reread and reading it in chronological order, like, I think you would get a lot more out of this. Because even stuff like Montoya and Bullock at the end, or like where they find all the bodies after everything's said and done, like, Bullock makes some mention about, oh, these are just these mass suicides that we get every so often with these weird tattoos, because it's all like,
another one of them.
it's like every now and then, like, Raish's goes after Batman with his army, and then there's just dead ninjas in Gotham with demon head tattoos on them. But even
it's almost like Forever's Gordon of, like, yep, definitely suicide. All right,
yeah,
let's close the book on this one.
Actually, since you brought it up, I did want to talk about Gordon briefly, but the Two-Face in this, since you mentioned Forever, I got a really big Tommy Lee Jones vibe out of this Two-Face. Like, he calls Batman a rat a lot. Like, I can't think of Dixon ever having Two-Face call Batman a rat at all, ever. But he does it like 3 or 4 times. And just even his dialogue, like, my only regret is I can't kill you twice. It's like, it just seems very Tommy Lee Jonesy, and maybe because it came out in the 90s and that was just more in my brain at the time.
Dixon really wanted to write, but just didn't know how to spell that really bad laugh of Lee Jones. You know.
But that's Two-Face isn't a major player in this. He's the throwaway recognizable villain. Did you like how he came off in this?
Yeah, well, it didn't bother me. Not my favorite. Given the tone though, it's like I didn't need Long Halloween serious Two-Face at the end
Yeah.
for this. He felt more at the time, and I was completely fine with that. Similar, you could just see it as like, oh, this is a cold open, which I respect the cold opens and stories and stuff like that of just Batman take down a villain, because it's like, hey, look at this. It's, it's Batman, member of his rogues, Batman takes him down. But there is a point here, and like Batman gets shot in the leg in the process, which we already talked about. That serves a purpose in the story. But yeah, he was a little more comic booky in this. I didn't put together the Tommy Lee Jones angle, but maybe not that far, but yeah, definitely parts of it for sure. Served his purpose and he got out of there. You referenced, I do like, again, this is like a cut. I like the inclusion of Penguin. Penguin pops up in this too, briefly, but I could see in an animated adaptation that they rework Penguin, but he serves a purpose. He wants this cup, and then he hires Catwoman, $5 million. It's at Wayne Manor. Go get it. Take absolutely nothing else. I'll give you $5 million.
Which seems low. like,
yeah.
I don't know. It seems really, really cheap to get, something of such historic significance.
Yeah, the Holy Grail, literally.
Yeah.
But he serves his purpose, and then that leads to a big moment in the story with Catwoman. So I think and that's where I was telling you too of like me trying to figure out where I feel like the book as a whole I think is fine. Highs and not like lows really either. It's like highs and fines. Because all this stuff I'm even in talking with you and we're hitting on them and connecting them, and it's like, well, yeah, that served a purpose. Two-Face served a purpose. Penguin served a purpose. I get some Bullock and Montoya. They did serve a purpose. Gordon, I'm not so sure.
Yeah,
he gives him a file, but what's in that file that Batman didn't already know?
Well, I like the line that Gordon sensed Batman in the room.
Love it. Yep.
Because that kind of puts him on an even playing field with Batman, because Batman's constantly like surprising him by showing up and then like leaving. Then he's like, oh, I'm talking to myself. That
evokes animated series to me.
Yeah.
Of Batman just showing up in his office.
Gordon's got this great line that he sensed Batman in the room. He's like, a shift in pressure in the room. I am a cop. Like that gives Gordon like agency. He's not the Pat Hingle, thanks for saving the day, Batman. And like he's a little more intelligent. The thing with the Gordon scene is that Bruce at this point, Batman is like he's wrestling with his faith about like a lot of things. Like he doesn't know, quite what to make of everything. He's seen the Grail heal his leg, but it doesn't show scientifically any properties. And he just kind of goes to Gordon to just bring up the question. And even though Batman doesn't say much, like they don't really have a conversation, it's more Gordon like telling Batman about where he stands with his faith and Sarah. That it speaks to their friendship. It's not something that I feel like we get a lot of these days, and it's just like two friends having a quick conversation in like that Batman fashion. And that's what it doesn't necessarily like, bright lights, arrows pointing, this is important to the story, like plot element, but it's just a nice character beat between two people as they kind of try and figure out where they stand on a couple things. But does it give Batman a concrete reason to keep going? I don't know, but I really do like the scene a lot.
I like its inclusion. I didn't necessarily get anything out of it though. I know that unless it is assurance of like you said, Batman checking in on Gordon, and Gordon himself even says of we go to church, but I don't know if that's just to let's see what he even says. I'm not sure how much of it is honoring a promise to my mother.
Yeah.
So Gordon doesn't even say of like I am a man of faith. I make sure I always go to church because I believe. It's question. He almost feels like I don't exactly know if I know why I go, which we know of Batman, and I think Batman, if he dips into religious stories, a lot of it is for the historical aspect of it.
Right.
They don't dip into Batman like preaching any sort of faith. And I think that's rightfully so, because like
Yeah.
there's a lot of different thoughts out there. And I don't think that Batman needs to be like has to directly go in one way. But I think it's appropriate here that he's undecided on stuff because there's a lot. I mean, there's a reason that they say with religion of faith, Batman has to be a man of science. In fact, I need to show you that here is proof. Well, faith is hard to grab it physically and show you,
Yeah.
you know? So I do appreciate his, I don't know how to feel on this because I think that's very humanistic for anybody to go
Yeah.
back. Okay, man, I don't know how to feel about this and question how do I feel about this. His proof though is that he poured water out of a cup, this holy cup, and his wound healed like that. That's but he goes around along the route. Okay, so this item then just had this artifact is valuable. It needs to be protected now then because Ra's Ra's al Ghul's coming to get it. And I don't think he's going to use it for good reasons. Because Ra's doesn't use things for good reasons. In his mind, he is, as I am not a father.
Yeah.
But I can understand egos getting in the way, and by being a protective father, that you want to protect your children. And so Ra's wants it not for himself, because he's immortal anyway. He wants it for his daughter. I love the inclusion of Talia here, albeit brief. So let's backtrack a little bit. I do like the quick little backstory that Ra's has and tells his assistant Shahram,
Yeah.
go to the Batman Book Club rules S, and telling him that he 3 times in history over these centuries that it's gotten just out of reach for him. That's a fun little history lesson. And then in the end, it does come out too that he wants it for Talia, so that Talia can live forever, basically like him.
Which is a fun twist on it, because I didn't remember that being the motivation. You think of Ra's al Ghul and you think of the Lazarus Pits and his obsession with them and living forever and taking over the world slowly. So you think, okay, there's the cup of Christ that can grant immortal life. Of course, Ra's would want that. You got to have a backup for the Lazarus Pits, but like to find out that that's not the reason why he wants it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that caught me off guard. Rereading it this time.
But then it's very fitting too that if it's not for him, then it's for his daughter.
Yeah,
well,
because we don't see that dynamic anymore between the two of them. They've been very antagonistic for like at least a decade now.
Mm-hmm.
Like the dynamic for them has changed considerably in the 21st century about how they relate to each other. And this era, Talia was much more subservient to her father.
Mm-hmm.
And I like though that while we get like this classic Batman versus Ra's battle, like in the end it's stopped by Talia like firing bullets between them, just like that's enough, children.
This childishness. I love that too. I was just like she does just come in and be like, you idiots, stop fighting over this thing. And
like I don't want it, and if I don't want it, then you don't need it. And he's like, all right.
And I really like that. Um, I mean, I like that moment, and he says, Talia, my darling, and she goes, about the grail, yes. And he goes, then you must know it is my gift to you, one draught from it. And she goes, I would spit it in your face. I would die for you, but I will not become immortal for you. And then the line which she says, let me live each day as a precious one, not dread each morning as an endless progression. Like, I really like that. And
Yeah.
I think Talia, she can be such a great character of like that moment. She's not a villain in this story at all.
No.
And then times when she is a villain can be written really well too. So it's like, I don't know, that's a good character when done well, of she can go either side, and it's, I don't know, it's good material.
Yeah. 100% agree with you on that.
Let's see.
And we get to see like Keaton style batarangs as they fight, which was awesome.
I was gonna mention the art quick, and one thing in the art, I know of one page in particular, page 30, but then there's some other parts popping up where I thought the cowl reminded me of Keaton. And then also reminded me of the cover of Child of Dreams, which was kind of
Yes.
done in reference to
Yeah.
89 cowl as well. And I thought some of those moments popping up were cool. Um,
And this is a Team Yellow Oval Batman.
it sure is. Hashtag Team Yellow Oval. We already talked about the art was a little bit like at times worked really well for me. At times it was all right. One of the main battles, I really liked the tweet you put out. I never thought of it or put it together. Um, since you made the observation, you can bring it up.
There's a fight between Batman and Raish's men on the docks, and he's going to stop. What was the gangster's name? It was something MM.
Well,
Not the Merovingians people, because those are going to the manor. There's like Mook, Mannheim, not Mannheim Superman.
Oh, the Mooks.
But there's some deal going down at the docks that Batman's getting, that's going on at the same time, that he's trying to stop as well. And that's when he gets attacked by Raish's men. And he's on top of like this kind of tower thing. And he's just surrounded by the League of Shadows. And Mankin, that's the gang that's there. But he's surrounded by these guys as he sits atop this pillar and is waxing poetic about it. But obviously I didn't think about it the first time I read it because Court of Owls hadn't come out. But it's very similar. It's a splash page, and it's very similar to one of Capullo's covers for City of Owls, where the Court of Owls is surrounding Batman in his pajamas atop Wayne Manor.
Yeah. That was a fun comparison.
Yeah, I don't know if Capullo thought of that and drew it, but it's an interesting look back. There's a lot of splash pages in this. I don't know if it's because they had the extra space, so it was intentional. But there's like quite a few.
If you're gonna do a book like this, I feel like you got to make it worth it. So you gotta, like, it gives the room to do more full page spreads and stuff, like splashes. So yeah. Didn't mention it before, but I mean, I do think the whole scene of Catwoman at Wayne Manor is awesome.
Yeah,
I love the interaction between her and Alfred Jeeves. Yeah, we didn't mention that, and I think that's a highlight of the story. Do you have anything else you want to bring up, or you want to move on to some favorites?
Let's see. I think
we've mentioned a lot for a 96-page book.
Yeah. Do you want to reveal what happens to the Grail, or do we want readers to find that out for themselves? We already kind of spoiled the ending as it was, so
Bruce gave it to someone that I think is a fun punctuation.
Yeah. I
that it's
agree.
appropriate and makes sense.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that. If you've read the
Yeah.
story, you know.
Yeah.
If you haven't, it didn't spoil it for you. So,
And it for me, it just entrenches it in this era, and it makes perfect sense that would be who he would go to.
yep, I agree. All right, Javi, I want to know. The fans demand it. They want to know. What was your favorite part of Batman Le Chalice?
Well, I had to think about it a lot because
Oh
I do
boy.
love me a good Batman race, the world's at stake battle.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just love how epic those feel. And that was a lot of fun with the batarangs and the sword fighting and all that. But I got to give it up to the Alfred and Selina combo. That it's funny because like I'm so used to thinking of Batcat now because that's all we've been getting.
Tim King. Yeah.
Yeah, it started in Hush where they became more of an I mean, they've been like together off and on before throughout the years, but modern era, like it kind of started with Hush that there was maybe something more, and then King really brought it to the forefront. So it was funny to go back and look at this during a time when maybe Alfred and Selina weren't as familiar with each other. And just the camaraderie they had dealing with things. And there's some great panels of them fighting the Merovingians, the Brotherhood. And even like at the end where Alfred, like Batman's going to go take care of the Grail to a secure location, and Alfred's dry, just as well, I suppose. I have a bit of straightening to do upstairs. Like you can just hear like any of the Alfred voice actors just deliver that line, and the way that Alfred kind of rolls his eyes as he looks upstairs, knowing what a disaster he and Selina made of it, and Batman probably doesn't even know yet. It's a fun moment that encapsulates like just a great fight scene of like Alfred with a shotgun and Selina with her whip taking on all these intruders in Wayne Manor. Like it was just a lot of fun.
So there's this movie. I haven't gotten to say this in a while. This movie in 1991. It's called Point Break. There's a guy in there cast as Gary, this is Gary Busey, and he says this thing where he leans out the window and says, "Utah, give me two." Because I fully agree with you, Javi. That is my favorite part as well. I love the spot on character quippiness of both Catwoman and Alfred, how they put their beefs aside because there's a bigger threat here, and then how it is almost like the gentleman's agreement at the end of like, well, let's just call it a truce. And then she just leaves and exits. I don't know. I love all that.
The fact that like she gets caught by one of the men and Alfred has to save her, but then she winds up just taking him out herself, and he's like, why did you wait? She's like, well, I was waiting for you to say where the thing was.
Well, she's also it's also like Gennaro on Jurassic Park of like clever girl when she empties the vase to watch where the water drips and drips to the clock. And so you're like, ooh, how close is she getting? So that trip was not a waste for her because she, like, in my mind, the story ends, but in my mind, it's like she knows it's putting that in her back pocket.
Yeah.
There's something going on behind this clock. Another day, another adventure. So
exactly.
All that stuff I thought was just good stuff.
Because Penguin's directive is only steal the Grail or the cup and don't grab any of the other things. And when she finally goes into Wayne Manor and she's just like a kid in the candy store of like all the great stuff that she could take.
Wow.
But this is the stuff that he's got out. Like what kind of stuff is he hiding?
She's like, so what's in the safe? If all this is what he's willing to show. How about a favorite panel?
Again, I wrestled a lot with that. I wound up with like 4 choices. But I want to say there's a great shot of like Batman giving his Grail history lesson. That's a splash page. That just, it's perfect in how just symmetrical it is. But My favorite is the 89 drop down shot of Batman crashing through the glass. It's a splash page, and he's like, and no one gets hurt. And it's awesome.
Nice.
There's so many good splash pages to choose from.
Mine is Batman behind Gordon in his office.
That one is also good.
Just because, I mean, it's Batman and
that
Gordon.
Is classic.
A lot of shadow. Like I said, evokes Batman the Animated Series to me. That on its own, without dialogue and with no context, I think it could be just a cool image too. Yep.
Yeah.
It's Batman,
what did you
Batman
think of
Gordon.
the shot of when he gets shot by Two-Face, the splash page, and there's just all these like bullets flying all over him? I mean, he's kind of diving down, yellow ovals on display.
I mean it positively, but I think it's fine. It wasn't a massive standout, but it is okay. It's not a mistake that one spot looks like a red circle. And then you think about it, it's like, okay, it's a bullet. Oh, okay, yep, one of them got him. And also,
he got shot in the panel before.
But I mean,
you see the entrance in the panel before.
But it's still keeping your eye on with that. But I think the bullets, it's one of those mixes of the bullet looks almost like that's a real image of a bullet.
Yeah.
Thrown in here with this, with this art, like a blending of the two.
Yeah, I can't tell if it's like a digital composite or if it's actually painted that way and it just looks that pristine.
I'm with you.
The bullets definitely pop out in a way that it doesn't quite blend in with the rest of the art that we see in the book.
Yeah.
But there's a couple things like with the city too, where I'm not sure where these backgrounds are coming from. If they like kind of like photocopied like a city and just kind of put it in the background and composited all the images together. Yeah. It's a unique book, even by like today, 24 years later after it came out, there's still nothing that you can compare to the visuals in this other than another Batman book by John Van Fleet.
It's a unique look that I think you should take your time with it and looking at the images, not just try and fly through.
Yeah.
And that's not a comment on, like I said, the beginning of times where I feel like the pacing is slower and should pick up. It's not because I'm sitting there looking at the art.
When you think of like Batman painted art or Batman painted stories, like it's not an Alex Ross style. It's not a Lee Bermejo style. It's not photorealistic in its depiction of people. It's definitely striking a certain mood that you just don't get with art that we normally see in these types of things.
Art.
Yeah.
Would you like to see this adapted in animation?
Yeah, I think the whole thing is kind of like a bigger scope than like the typical Batman story because it's got so many different elements. So I think it would translate really well to the small screen as like an animated movie, but not in your typical, I guess it's called the Tomorrowverse now. The new style, the new universe that they're doing. I saw that branding the other day, I guess because the first new movie was Superman Man of Tomorrow. So I guess like stuff like Long Halloween is in this Tomorrowverse universe. I wouldn't want it like that. I would want it to be more like Battle of the Super Sons, to use like that CGI type of animation because the book stands out from like a normal comic book. I feel like it deserves an animation style that differentiates it from everything else.
Yeah. I like going different as well. Is it something like I wouldn't mind it. With it being a story or a 96-page story, I think they could leave everything in and maybe flesh out a little bit more. Add an action piece or something like that too. I don't know. I think you could do, the Batman the Doom that came to Gotham, dipped into like horror and, I don't know if you want like not really mythology, but it went into history of things. I mean, in this one could do the same thing. Um, there's a way that you can avoid being too controversial. Like I don't think this one is religiously controversial because it is dealing with history and like, well, do you
Yeah.
believe in the history or not? That's it. It's not telling you to forcing something on you. I think they can approach that and add some stuff, and then yeah, like you said, I would want the art to be an original style.
I
Doesn't
think
have to
it,
try and copy John Van Fleet at all, but like just make it a
yeah,
little unique.
yeah. And I think like I've mentioned it before, like there's, as long as they stick it, keep it in that vein of like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where you're not telling people, you're not forcing the
We're
belief
we're not
system
a
on them when
sermon.
it comes to religion. Yeah.
This isn't a
But
sermon.
just, but have it be like this grand adventure. And, you don't know. Let the audience find out the answers that they want to find, let them make up their own minds about what it all means. So I think if they stuck in that vein, then they would be a-okay.
Yeah. Um. Quick final thoughts then as we wrap
Actually,
up.
there's one note that
No,
I forgot
no,
about.
Javi. Come on.
Your friend Peter DeWittering,
Oh yeah, that guy. He's
when
he's
when
the
he talks
Lord
to
Winsley-Gate
Batman,
and Earl of Grambling. In case you
yeah,
didn't know. Okay.
when he meets Bruce, did you get Professor Noby from Evil Dead 2 vibe? Like, you remember when he shows up in the cabin, he's like in between worlds and he's kind of like this weird ghost face.
Yeah.
That's what he reminded me of, because it's like Batman or Bruce is talking to him like on a screen almost. And then as he's like, hey, you're going to have this grail. And then he just kind of fades away and dies. And
Let me just
that's
tell
just,
you this, and then
yeah. Like there's a little like EKG thing at the bottom and then it just bottoms out. It flatlines. But like the
I
way that Van
didn't.
Fleet shows his
But
face, I'm like, that kind of reminds me of Evil Dead 2. And I wondered, since you're a horror guy, if you made that connection also.
it didn't. But now, thanks.
There you go.
I mean, I'll be watching. I'll probably go through and watch the first two Evil Deads again before this new one comes up and out. But yeah, now I'm going to be thinking about it. So appreciate it.
There you go. There you go. But
Lord
final
Winsley-Gate and
thought,
Earl of Grambling, Professor Noby. Yeah,
final
final
thoughts.
thoughts.
I still really enjoy it. It's
Mhm.
not one of my favorite all-time greatest Batman stories,
Yeah.
but I think there's a lot to love in it. And it's definitely a product of its time in terms of like the world Batman is in, but not in a bad way. I think, if you're just familiar with like the basics of the characters, you can jump in and find something to love and appreciate. And again, it may not be everyone's favorite
Cup
Batman
of
cup of
tea,
tea. Yeah.
cup of blood. I don't know.
Cup of, but if you like that kind of like big adventure Batman stories, with like a touch of the supernatural, then I think you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of reading this book. I can't vouch for the Yonk because it's been forever, but I
Yeah.
still really enjoy this story a lot.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to think when I reread that. Maybe my mind is changed. Maybe I was in a mood when I read it before. I don't know. But I always like to, if I don't like something, most of the time I want to read it a second time just so I can confirm my feelings. Because I've been surprised before, and on a second reading, it's like, hold on, I actually like this more.
Like Tom King's Batman. Like for me personally, like as they came out bi-weekly, I wasn't digging it at all. But when I started reading them like in trades, I did like a huge binge one day, and like it played so differently.
It's
And
better.
I really love that era now.
Um,
So yeah, you never know.
yeah, I still think the book as a whole is fine. I'd recommend, I mean, if you're a Batman reader, read it. This shout out to Doug Eisenbraun. Doug E. He reads everything that's coming up on the show, and then he'll say whether he liked it or not. But he's always, I'll read it. I'll give it a shot, and I think I'll always recommend someone, even if it's a story that I can be like, I flat out, I do not like this. I hate it. I'd still say, well, read it and come up with your own opinion. Like, sure.
Yeah.
So if you haven't read it yet, and then I can also recommend that if you weren't necessarily the biggest fan, but you're like, I don't know, you can read it a second time and confirm those feelings. I think it's a fine story. I don't own it. I don't know if I will own it. I would not put off reading it again in the future either. Like, I just read it twice. I don't feel like I need to read it one last time. But
Right.
I mean, I'll check it out again in the future, because I do think like there are some. It's not a disgrace, or it's like, that's what I mean. Fine. That's not meant negatively. It leans more positive. Fine, but it, like, to me, that's just kind of where it sits, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Javi's got his whip out. He would whip me if he could through the screen, but that's not going to happen. So, thanks for coming back on the show.
Yeah, man, I'm always happy to talk Batman with you. So
Glad
you for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you chose a book that, wasn't fresh in my mind. It was, even though I know what I've said, I'm really glad I got to read something felt fresh. I was unfamiliar with again. That's always a treat for me too. So, why don't you go ahead and plug away anything and everything that you want?
You can find me on batmanonfilm.com, where
Never heard of it.
I just wrapped up reviewing Batman. Is it called? No, it's not called Batman. Gotham City Year One by Tom King and Phil Hester, which is just, for me personally, it's right up there with Batman Year One. It's just a great Year One type of story that, if you want to find out, not like Batman the Knight, where it's kind of like how Bruce went on his journey to become Batman. This is like the journey of how Gotham City went from being a place that was revered more than Metropolis to the Gotham that created Batman. And it's a fantastic film noir read. I'm also reviewing Batman, The Adventures Continue Season 3, and Catwoman, which is going to be crossing over with Batman soon. So that'll be interesting. You can go to the JamesBondDossier.com, where I'm reviewing Philip Kennedy Johnson's 007 series, which has also been, at least from a writing perspective, a really good book to read. And I also launched my own YouTube channel, The Flash Up to Speed with Wally West, where I am starting at the beginning of his solo series in 1987 and just reviewing one episode at a time, one issue at a time, and just kind of walking people through it, letting them know Wally's history and giving my thoughts on it. So I have my pilot episode up where I kind of go into my fandom of Wally West and how I got there, and reviewing his first appearance in The Flash 110. And I'm recording his first issue appearance soon. And I've also got a review up for the Tweeterhead Flash 1/6 scale statue, which is a masterpiece to look at. I'm really happy that I got it. So that's where I'm at. And Up to Speed 5 on Twitter, Javi True on Twitter. The Bond Is Not Enough on Instagram, or you can just go to batmanonfilm.com. Find all my reviews there.
Rock on. There you go. So as you can see, Javi isn't doing anything. So
I'm no Peter Vera.
But follow him anyway. Follow him anyway. For the Batman Book Club, you can follow on Twitter and Instagram at the Batman BC for upcoming episodes, episode drops, sometimes even some giveaways. Also subscribe to the Batman Book Club YouTube channel. Pete and I are going to get back to the Road to No Man's Land. We're going to wrap that up in April. You can make it, like, it's going to happen. Believe in us.
I need to catch up on that.
If you want to write into the show for questions or comments, concerns, go to Eric Holzman. You can do that at thebatmanbc@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, there's a variety of ways you can do that. You can join new patron Alex Light on patreon.com/thebatmanbc. You can go to tpublic.com/tbbc for the Batman Book Club for some merchandise like t-shirts, notebooks, onesies for your little ones. But if you don't want to spend any money at all, it's 100% A-OK. The easiest, cheapest, and most impactful thing you can do is rate and review the show wherever you listen to it, whatever podcasts host that you listen to. So Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google, iHeartRadio, wherever. Just go to the rate and review page, rate and review the show, because the more reviews it gets, the more it helps spread the word. And as we all know, as Roswell Will himself said it, the word is panic. So for Javi Trujillo, I am Ryan Lauer, and until next time, read my panic.